Commissioner Gordon, Bane has escaped.
You waste more life hesitating than failing. That's the hidden cost of indecision. It pretends to protect you, but it actually paralyzes you. While you weigh options, opportunity decays. While you second guess, someone else moves. Life is not lost in disasters. It leaks through hesitation. The man who masters decisive action doesn't wait for perfect information. He reads the pattern, trusts the data he has, and strikes. Because while the thinker overcalibrates, the executor reshapes the battlefield. Most people aren't losing because they made the wrong move. They're losing because they made none. Clarity comes from movement, not thought. You don't figure things out by thinking about them endlessly. You act. You experiment. You take a step, then use what happens to choose the next one. Momentum feeds clarity like oxygen feeds fire. And the mind that refuses to move in uncertainty is training itself to die in comfort. You want to know what decisiveness looks like? It's ugly. It's risky. It's full of losses. But it builds identity. It builds instinct. The man who always waits to be sure will forever be at the mercy of those who are willing to decide. Indecision is self-sabotage disguised as intelligence. You tell yourself you're just being careful, but you're actually protecting your ego from error. Because if you move and fail, the world sees it. But if you delay, you get to pretend you're still thinking it through. That illusion buys time, but robs growth. The only way to build resilience is through action that costs something real. The harder the decision, the more it sharpens you. And if you're scared of the blade, you'll never learn to cut. The difference between average and elite is 1 second, one pause, one hesitation in the moment that required a strike. Most men know what to do, they just don't do it fast enough. And in that delay, the opportunity closes. Doors don't stay open for the indecisive. They swing shut fast and lock behind you. Decisive action doesn't mean you'll always win, but it guarantees you'll be in the arena. And if you're not in the arena, nothing you think or plan or dream matters. You train decisiveness like a muscle. Every time you choose quickly, you strengthen it. Every time you delay, you atrophy. The man who moves fast isn't reckless. He's conditioned. He knows that time favors the one who bends it. He creates pressure instead of reacting to it. And over time, that behavior becomes identity. He becomes the type of man who doesn't flinch, doesn't stall, doesn't waste cycles spinning. He chooses. He commits. And if it breaks, he learns. But he moves. Most people let life decide for them. They wait so long that circumstance makes the choice. That is surrender disguised as strategy. You want control? Decide. Early, firmly, and accept what comes. Because there's power in owning your outcome, even when it's failure. You build power by proving to yourself that you can respond, that you can shape, shift, adapt, that you're not at the mercy of chance, but the author of consequence. Action doesn't wait for confidence. Confidence is the reward, not the prerequisite. You want belief in yourself? Do things before you're ready. Make moves while your hands shake. That's how self-trust is built. You act in fear. You bleed in motion. And the mind starts to realize, we can survive this. The man who only moves when it feels good has already lost. Because reality doesn't bend for comfort. It bends for force. There's a rhythm to decisive living. You start hearing it when you kill hesitation long enough. It sounds like clarity. feels like control, looks like dominance. You know what you want. You know what needs to happen. And you don't give yourself the luxury of delay. That's a luxury reserved for losers, for observers, for those who think about life while watching it slip away. Decisive men don't watch. They interrupt. They intervene. They attack the timeline and leave the rest gasping for reaction. There is no such thing as a perfect decision, only timely ones. You're not aiming for flawless, you're aiming for forward. Every action is a vote for the future. Every choice is a hammer strike against stagnation. You may not always choose the ideal path, but you'll always outpace the man waiting for one. Life doesn't reward the perfect. It rewards the present. The ones who show up while others prepare. The ones who move when the rest hesitate. The brain makes up to 35,000 decisions every day, most without fanfare, most without thought. Open the app, check the message, grab the snack, scroll one more time, keep the volume up, react instead of reflect. These aren't choices, they're reflexes dressed as autonomy. But when you strip away the noise, you see the truth. Life isn't decided in singular moments of glory. It's built in thousands of tiny yes and no that most people are too numb to recognize. And those decisions, left unconscious, turn into chains. They become the architecture of regret. Decisive people aren't faster because they're smarter. They're faster because they've trained for war. War against distraction. War against temptation. War against micro-decisions that lead nowhere. They've narrowed their field. They've said no so many times that the mind no longer flinches when it sees temptation. Because they don't see options, they see waste. Waste of time, waste of energy, waste of the only currency that matters, focus. And they protect that focus with a violence you'll never understand until you feel it for yourself. You think decisions are about knowledge. But knowledge doesn't stop you from clicking the app, or eating the sugar, or replying to the nonsense. What stops you is identity. It's the internal blueprint you etched in silence, the man you decided to become. The world tries to reprogram you every second with garbage, gossip, and guilt. But the decisive man doesn't let the algorithm do his thinking. He doesn't hand the wheel to chance. He writes code. He lives by command. The cost of indecision is subtle. It won't wreck you today. It will slowly bend your spine. It will let your standards slide. It will let your calendar fill with tasks that mean nothing. And one day you'll wake up exhausted, not from doing too much, but from doing too little that mattered. The decisive man doesn't fear overcommitment. He fears diffused intent. He sharpens his life until only the essential remains. He doesn't juggle. He builds. There's a myth that decisive people are always confident. Wrong. They're just more willing to risk being wrong and recover. Because real damage doesn't come from error. It comes from apathy, from floating, from being passively steered by emotion and convenience. The decisive man doesn't aim to be perfect. He aims to finish. And in finishing, he sharpens the blade. He learns faster, adapts faster, fails forward, not sideways. Most people think indecision is harmless, but hesitation robs your life in slow motion. It fragments your will. You lose the thread. You doubt your gut. You ask for opinions that dilute your voice. And slowly your ability to choose, your sovereignty, erodes. Until one day you're no longer a man making decisions. You're a reaction, dressed up like a person. The decisive man avoids this fate by killing the root. He filters with force. He defines the few things that matter and rejects everything else. You want energy? Cut decisions. Make fewer, but make them with your chest. The man who filters fast doesn't just have more time. He has more power. Because every yes is backed by 100 no's. Every action is clean. No overthinking, no regret, just momentum. The decisive man stacks days like bricks. No cracks, no softness, just clarity, compounding. And that clarity bleeds into everything, how he speaks, moves, plans, reacts. He becomes a weapon, honed by subtraction. Decisiveness is the art of building a life that doesn't drain you. It's choosing once, so you don't have to choose again. It's designing routines that do the thinking for you. It's saying, "This is who I am," and burning everything that doesn't match. The average man makes 1,000 random choices and calls it freedom. The decisive man makes one aligned choice and builds an empire on top of it. There's nothing accidental about greatness. It's a result of decisions made when no one's watching. What to eat, what to read, what to ignore, what to do when it's raining, when it's boring, when it's hard. Most fold in those moments. The decisive man rises because his decisions weren't made in the moment. They were made before the moment. He doesn't decide whether or not to show up. He decided who he is, and the rest follows. Every time you delay a decision, you fracture. The man you said you were and the man you're acting like. They start to drift. One says, "I'm disciplined." The other hits snooze. One says, "I want growth." The other scrolls endlessly. That gap, that's where identity begins to rot. You don't feel it all at once. It starts as discomfort, then doubt, then decay. Until the voice in your head that used to speak like a king now stutters like a prisoner. And the worst part? You did it to yourself. Not by choosing wrong, but by refusing to choose at all. When you say one thing and do another, the mind records both. It doesn't honor your intentions. It honors your behavior. You think you're driven, but your body is still. You think you're focused, but your attention is bleeding out. The brain doesn't care about your self-concept. It cares about your pattern. It watches you say you'll start the project and then watches you watch others. It hears you talk about vision and sees you paralyzed in comfort. And when enough of these moments stack, it stops believing you. The man who delays his decisions becomes a stranger to himself. He stands in front of the mirror and no longer sees power. He sees contradiction, and contradiction is corrosive. Because you can't build clarity on a foundation of lies. You can't stack momentum when every brick is soaked in hesitation. To master the art of decisive action is to protect your alignment. That invisible spine between who you say you are and what your behavior confirms. That's the root. That's the difference between dominance and dysfunction. This is why people spiral. Not because they lack vision, but because they violate it, over and over again. They imagine a self that takes action, but they keep betraying that image with inaction. And every time they avoid the hard choice, they reinforce the idea that their identity is fragile, that it folds under pressure. You want to change your life? Don't look at your thoughts. Look at your last 20 actions. That's the real you. Everything else is branding. The decisive man doesn't rely on identity statements. He lets his behavior define him. If he says he's relentless, it's because he just proved it. Again. If he says he's focused, it's because nothing outside the mission distracts him. This is not affirmation. This is architecture, built by brutal honesty, reinforced through aligned decisions. Every time he commits, follows through, and closes the loop, his identity gains mass, weight, sharpness, and that becomes armor. People don't collapse under hard lives. They collapse under fractured lives. Lives where the story doesn't match the footage. Where you say you're disciplined, but your calendar says chaos. Where you say you're committed, but your task list is a graveyard. That fracture isn't harmless. It poisons confidence. Because when the moment comes to act, you don't trust yourself. You hesitate. Not because you lack capacity, but because you've trained yourself to be unreliable. This is why most men play small. Not because they don't want more, but because they don't believe they'll follow through. They've lied to themselves so many times they think conviction is theater. So they talk big and move small. They dream loud and act soft. But the decisive man doesn't do theater. He doesn't speak unless it's backed by action. Because he knows the mind is always listening, always watching. And it doesn't remember what you promise. It remembers what you prove. Decisiveness isn't a productivity hack. It's identity preservation. Every time you make the hard decision immediately, you align. You remind the system, this is who we are. Every time you delay it, you drift. And that drift compounds until your life is a performance and your confidence is paper thin. But the man who chooses fast, who acts with clarity, he builds a spine that doesn't bend under pressure. He moves through chaos like he's immune to it. Because his compass is calibrated by action, not intention. You don't need a new plan. You need fewer gaps, fewer contradictions between word and movement. Decide quickly, act relentlessly. Let reality reflect your choices, not your doubts. Because when your behavior and your identity say the same thing, everything moves faster. The friction disappears, the momentum returns. And that's when the world starts calling you disciplined, confident, focused. But by then, those aren't compliments. They're just descriptions. The mind burns calories with every decision. That's not poetry, it's biology. After just 10 to 20 decisions, your mental edge dulls. Every should I, every pointless fork in the road, drains the voltage from your prefrontal cortex. It's like slicing paper with a sword meant for steel. You wear down the edge on trivial cuts, and by the time the moment that matters finally arrives, you're too tired to act with force. That's why most people fail. Not from lack of strength, but because they bled out in the shallows before ever reaching the deep. The world worships productivity, but the real game is preservation. You don't win by outworking everyone. You win by conserving power until it's time to strike. That's what habits do. They aren't about routine. They are about armor. Every habit you build is a decision you never have to make again. It becomes coded, executable, no friction, no hesitation, just precision embedded in behavior. The man who architects his habits doesn't just live better, he thinks clearer, because his bandwidth isn't cluttered with the petty. It's locked and loaded for the pivotal. Decisive men don't wake up and decide whether to train, whether to create, whether to focus. Those decisions were made once, burned into identity and automated through design. The day doesn't begin with doubt. It begins with deployment. Their environment is preloaded. Their tools are pre-staged. Their mornings are sacred ground, scripted, rehearsed, and protected. Because they understand that wasted decisions aren't neutral. They are costly. They rob future clarity. They make warriors act like wanderers. Every yes costs something. That's why the decisive man isn't minimal because it looks good. He's minimal because he's strategic. His closet has no chaos. His meals are planned. His schedule is boring, but his results are violent. Because what looks like repetition from the outside is actually refinement from the inside. Simplicity isn't weakness, it's lethality. You want to scale your performance? Stop relying on motivation, it's fragile, it fades. Build systems instead. Systems that remove choice entirely. Systems that lock you into alignment. Because every time you have to decide whether to do the hard thing, you've already lost. The best performers don't choose to show up daily. They built lives where showing up is the only option left. And that's how it should be. Discipline should feel automatic, ruthless, non-negotiable. Habits are your frontline defense against mental fatigue. They are how you conserve decision-making for war, not weather. The man who tries to will his way through every day is dead by noon. But the one who installed rituals, patterns, triggers, he's still sharp at night, still locked in when others are collapsing. Not because he's superhuman, but because he respects cognitive cost. He knows that clarity is a resource and treats it like gold. This is where elite identity begins. In the background, in the invisible systems, in the behind-the-scenes blueprint no one sees. The audience watches the highlight reel, but the builder designed the default. That's what wins. Not peak effort, but peak structure. You don't rise when it matters by luck. You rise because you spent years eliminating unnecessary choices. You trained your environment to push you forward. You trained your brain to move without asking permission. Most people drown in indecision because they haven't systemized anything. They react. They adapt. But they never control. So every new day becomes a battlefield of tiny choices that chip away at resolve. That is not ambition. That is entropy. And it never leads to greatness. But the decisive man knows better. He engineers his flow, and that flow becomes force. Unstoppable, silent, repeatable. That's the foundation of momentum that doesn't break under pressure. You don't need to make better decisions. You need to make fewer of them. And the way you do that is through architecture, not willpower. Architecture is the ultimate flex. It's when your life is so well built that even on your worst day, you outperform their best. That's not discipline, it's design. And once you taste that clarity, you'll never go back to chaos. The great illusion is that freedom comes from keeping your options open. But that illusion is the enemy of mastery. True freedom is found in commitment to a direction, to a structure, to a path that costs you uncertainty in exchange for clarity. The decisive man doesn't crave infinite choices. He craves the right choice made once with finality. He doesn't hop between tools, diets, routines, or strategies. He finds what aligns with his mission, then scorches the bridge behind him. That destruction, that's liberation. That's what allows him to move forward without dragging the weight of second-guessing through every step. Undecided men leave doors open to soothe their fear of loss. Decided men slam them shut to lock in greatness. They don't half-live 10 different lives, they go all in on one. That's not recklessness, it's strategic clarity. Because every time you leave the back door open just in case, you divide your energy. And split energy can't build empires. The most dangerous man in the world is the one who's already burned the boats, because he has nothing to return to. Every move is forward. Every decision is carved in permanence. There's no wiggle room for weakness, only momentum. Look around at your daily life. Every repeated doubt, every wandering hour, every mental loop. That's the cost of failing to predecide. You lose power not through inaction, but through leakage. The drip of energy into decision fatigue. And when the moment to strike does come, you're not just unprepared, you're drained. You can't operate with intensity if every minor decision bleeds you out before the major one even arrives. The decisive man protects his energy not with rest, but with structure, and that structure becomes his weapon. The tragedy is not failing once. It's failing slowly over decades through micro-indecision, through 1,000 delayed yeses, through a lifetime of maybe. The man who hesitates in the small things trains himself to freeze in the big ones. But the man who acts fast, filters hard, and moves relentlessly builds a rhythm that cannot be broken. His nervous system calibrates to certainty. His eyes scan for targets, not threats. And his movement carries a heaviness because it's backed by a life that has already been chosen, not one waiting for approval. Master the art of decisive action, and then go deeper. Your throne is waiting your arrival.